Good afternoon. I'd like to call the November 14th, 2023 School Board Work Session to order. And first, we have an update from the College Board, Dr. Merriman.
Good afternoon, Ms. Coker, Ms. Haynes, school board members, and Dr. Daugherty. I'm pleased to be here. I'm really pleased to be here right now that Valerie Keating made it here also. Senior Director with the College Board, and we're going to be discussing some advanced coursework at the high school level, specifically our SAT suite, advanced placement courses, and dual enrollment courses. Ms. Keating will be starting with the College Board information. I'll be finishing up with some dual enrollment information. And I know that you all will be hearing more later on this evening about college and career readiness at the business meeting with Chad Macklin. So this is like a little bit to whet your appetite on those pieces.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you all for having me. Happy New Year. Happy new school year. I'm so pleased to be back and share a little bit about the results of the SAT suite of assessments and also some updates around the benefits and opportunities for students and families. So as the reminder, the SAT suite of assessments are the three assessments, the PSAT 8-9, PSAT, and MSQT, and of course the SAT. By offering all three assessments, the Chesterfield students and families and educators get a year-over-year check-in on students' college and career readiness, and they can monitor their progress over time. They're also assessments that are aligned to our state standards. So the benefits to students and parents are, again, that is a year-over-year check-in on students' progress towards college and career readiness. It's aligned to our standards in Virginia, but also educators get score reports and score reporting. That score reporting can be used to inform instruction and also connect more students with advanced academics, specifically advanced placement. And I have some of that advanced placement data and information updates in Virginia to share as well. I thought it'd be really important right now to also stop and have a 2023 reminder or check-in on the SAT also, and talk about why the SAT is still relevant and a very important tool for students and families. So before the pandemic, we saw some schools adopting, when I say schools, colleges and universities adopting test optional policies. And of course, that was the right thing to do, was to suspend some of those policies during the pandemic. And many of those policies have hung on. Since the pandemic, though, what we have seen is that students still want the opportunity to take the test and make a decision about how to use their score. It's also, though, a very important tool to help students to raise their hand and be seen. And there are three important ways that students, or rather that the SAT helps students do that. It's through scholarships and national recognition programs, through the career insights, as well as through the college connections and college recruiting. So the scholarships, there are more than $300 million awarded through the PSAT and SAT. We have expanded the number of students who are awarded scholarships by using the PSAT through work with our national partners like the Gates Foundation and, of course, National Merit. The College Board's national recognition programs shine a light on students who are underrepresented or maybe underrepresented in the college-going process. So Hispanic students, Black and African American students, students from rural areas, and also Indigenous students. The career insights piece, to me, is the most exciting, and it is the newest part with the shift to digital also. So you know that the digital PSAT, with the first offering of the digital PSAT was this fall, and now student score reports are coming out. Student score reports are delivered based on test dates, so Chesterfield students will get scores throughout the month of November, and every student in Virginia will get career insights. Louder? Oh, they've never asked me to be louder. How exciting. Okay. So the career insights for every Virginia student, they'll have 6 careers listed on their score report. And to me, that's the important part of the next step for our students. I think it's a very important reason of why Chesterfield has made the decision to make this an opportunity for every student. We are connecting students with what it is that they want to do after high school and providing insight and opportunity to that. The last benefit that I mentioned, or relevant point that I mentioned for the SAT, was in college recruiting. And that is that the SAT can really round out the application for students and put some data behind the more subjective parts of a college application. But it also connects students with opportunities, and they can be recognized for, again, scholarship programs or particular programs in college. Is it time for me to ask for questions, or shall I push on also, Dr. Marian? Yep, you got it. Okay, so the data pieces, this is the snapshot of, over the last 5 years, participation in Chesterfield on the SAT suite of assessments as well as advanced placement. So these bars are test takers. And you'll remember that in the 2019-2020 school year was the first year of implementation in Chesterfield of the PSAT 8-9. That's actually the second set that's marked by 2020. The years at the top are the second part of the school year, if we think of it that way. So that was the first year where we, in the fall of 2019, we offered the PSAT 8-9 to all 8th and 9th grade students. That spring, the March administration of the SAT school day, which was planned to be the first administration of SAT school day in the school division, was of course canceled. Since then, more students, of course, have been back to school and have been participating in the assessments in Chesterfield. You'll see in the 2021 year, you can also think of that as the graduating cohort. And of course, that was the cohort who was most greatly impacted by the pandemic when we talk about SAT participation, because those school closures in March of 2020 would have been the spring of their junior year when they would have been taking the SAT. The reminder that the SAT suite of assessments are measured on a vertical score scale. And so when a student takes the PSAT 8-9 and they get their score back, they can read that score to say, had I taken the SAT, this is what I would have scored. Then, of course, the next question is, well, is that good? Right? And that was the important work that I did as a school counselor in Virginia. But it really is also about connecting students with the opportunity. I captured at the bottom here the mean scores by grade level, and you can see that year over year, the mean scores are increasing, moving more of our students towards meeting the college and career readiness benchmarks. Reminder that the SAT provides a college and career readiness benchmark at the section level that would say when the student meets it for English, we know with a 75% likelihood that they are ready to earn a C or better in a first semester credit-bearing English course. By providing the assessments year over year, students set a readiness benchmark in the 8th grade. Parents and their educators get that yearly check-in each year in Chesterfield when the students take a test in fall of 9th through 11th grade. And then by providing the SAT in the spring, you're providing that opportunity and connection with the scholarship and national recognition programs, as well as the career insights and college recruiting. One important factor of the SAT suite of assessments are those instructional reports and the data reporting for educators. And it's to help educators make data-informed decisions about connecting students with opportunities, and in particular, opportunities for advanced academics. And of course, in the world of College Board, that'd be advanced placement. The fast facts about the impacts of AP are that advanced placement is valued in the college admissions process. It has looked very favorably for students who participate in AP. So just by taking the courses and having that on their transcript, by having those opportunities in their high schools, it provides the admissions benefit. AP students are more likely to finish their degree promptly, which is, of course, a cost savings to the student and the family. College years aren't BOGO, so it's not like you can get extra free years by staying in for a 5th or 6th year. We want to make sure that our students are prepared for college-level work, and advanced placement provides that opportunity. Above and beyond the preparation, advanced placement also offers the opportunity for students to earn college credit. And in Virginia, that is particularly relevant because we do have an AP credit policy. And so when students earn a score of 3, 4, or 5, what we call the qualifying scores, they can earn college credit, which again is a cost savings to the family. Our research has also shown that students who participate in AP also outperformed their non-AP peers in first-year college GPA. We had published recent research showing the benefits of students who take an AP exam. And so for even when a student earns a score of a 1 or 2, so what we call not a non-qualifying score, they outperformed their non-AP peers in college enrollment. What we found beyond that was that when a student earns a 1 or a 2 and then they go on to take additional AP, they do better in those future year AP exams as well. I captured the AP data for Chesterfield here over the last 5 years and showing the highest percentage of qualifying scores earned for the May 2023 administration, with 67% of AP exams taken in Chesterfield earned a qualifying score. The highest yet, prior to that, the highest qualifying score rate was in 2019, was 66% of AP exams earning a qualifying score. Here are the top 10 AP exams in Chesterfield. They're organized by number of exams taken, and then I also captured the number of qualifying scores, so the numbers of 3s, 4s, 5s, and then the percentage of qualifying scores for each of those subjects. When I support school divisions in Virginia and we look at data together, I'm very transparent, very clear that my goal is not to find the valedictorian of 38th or 39th AP class. Maybe you live with one of those students who has taken several challenging classes in 1 year. My goal is not to stress them out or you out either, but rather to connect them with opportunities that will benefit them in the long run. Looking over here, you have a lot of really good opportunities for students to take advanced placement, especially in the 11th and 12th grade year when we look at things like English language and English literature, calculus, and US history, which was in the 11th grade. We have recent research from the College Board that shows that the greatest benefit in taking AP as it relates to college degree completion is actually after a student takes 1 AP exam or earns 1 qualifying score. And so for that reason, I have been working with Virginia school divisions to connect more students, more different students, with advanced placement opportunities. Chesterfield is ahead of the game in that when it comes to using data to make those decisions, to make data-driven decisions. The reason why goes back directly to your PSAT offerings. By offering the PSAT 8, 9, and 8th and 9th grade, you have early AP potential data on students, and students, families, and educators can make informed decisions about a good fit for a student. Again, it's not about just piling on more AP classes, but if we see the greatest benefit here on this slide after just taking 1, so the steepest slope, after just taking 1, we want to find the right fit for students. So I mentioned that Chesterfield is ahead of the game in doing that by offering the PSAT and using that data to inform academic planning, discussions, and academic and career plans. One way that the College Board has opened access to that is through new courses and through courses programmed in a different way. And I have worked with the VDOE to expand those offerings when it comes to AP Seminar and the newer course English 10 AP Seminar, which the State Board of Education approved to count for English 10 late in the year last year. Chesterfield joins the state in a high percentage of qualifying scores in AP Seminar. 96% of AP Seminar scores in Chesterfield last year earned a qualifying score. Right now, the offerings were at Cosby and James River, I should say, for last administration also. And the reason why we are expanding access to this course is because it prepares students for their future year advanced academic courses, as well as for college enrollment, and then also benefits to students when they go on to college for first year GPA and retain in college towards their degree completion. I think this is where I get to hand off.
Yes. I'm going to follow up because we recognize advanced placement courses is not the only way our students here in Chesterfield can earn college credit. We also do offer dual enrollment And remember, as Ms. Keating spoke about, with AP, you have to take the course and earn a qualifying score of 3, 4, and 5. With the dual enrollment class, you take the course, and through taking the course and passing said course, that's how you earn your college credit there. And we do that through our partnership with Brightpoint, is how the vast majority of our dual enrollment courses are held. We currently have 74 Brightpoint credentialed high school instructors teaching dual enrollment courses in English, math, science, social studies, world languages, art, music, fitness, and business. They do have to be credentialed through Brightpoint. So in order to be a dual enrollment teacher, they have to have a master's degree and they have to have at least 18 credit hours within the content that they're teaching. And that content has to be verified by Brightpoint before they're credentialed to be a dual enrollment teacher. So that does end up becoming a bit of a barrier for us. So we're constantly working on helping to get cohorts together for more teachers to become able to teach dual enrollment courses if they would like to. This right here shows some of our numbers of our students who've been taking dual enrollment coursework. If you notice from 21-22 up to this current school year, we are increasing in the number of our students who are taking dual enrollment courses. Some of that is through, and I've spoken about previously to y'all, is the distance learning piece, where we've tried to make sure that students who didn't have the opportunity to take a dual enrollment course of a particular subject in their home school could take it through distance learning. Additionally, we've been looking at how do we offer the additional dual enrollment courses in each of our schools, once again, making sure that we have our credentialed teachers. This number here, the 4,120, please keep in mind that first column, the 2,654, are individual students. A student can take more than one dual enrollment course. So realistically, it's like we have 4,120 seats in dual enrollment, if that makes sense. I think one of the things that is really tremendous to look at is that, we had 7 students last year earn over 45 credits just in dual enrollment. This is not, of course, talking about anything related to advanced placement college credits, just dual enrollment credits. Like, wow. Like, let's just take a moment and say wow, because I know I would not have been able to probably do that in high school. I don't think back then they even had this much dual enrollment in high schools. But anyway, but realistically, our students are having a tremendous opportunity to take dual enrollment coursework in order to earn college credits. I think that piece, combined with what we're trying to do with our advanced placement coursework, is really opening doors for our students, allowing them the opportunity to really push the rigor of their coursework when they're really very much supported by their high school teaching staff and their families at home prior to them going to college and dipping their toe into what it's like when you're in the middle of all of that. We should party over that. Like, we are doing tremendous work here. So realistically, though, we are increasing the number of our students. Please also remember we've moved away from the actual associate's degree, as Brightpoint had asked us to, because it does not transfer as well. We really are looking to make sure our students are earning very transferable dual enrollment credit, rather than credit just to say they've taken credit. At this point, Ms. Keating and I would be more than willing to answer any questions for y'all if you have any.
Thank you both very much. Board members, is there any discussion? Ms. Heffron?
Thank you. Am I loud enough? So I have a couple of questions about AP. How are the students engaged in those SAT results and the career explorations? You mentioned that there's results that come from this. How do we engage our students in those answers?
Actually, that's one of the things that we've been really working on throughout our time in this process, is making sure that we're helping students connect to Khan Academy so they continue to work on their scores and moving from PSAT to SAT. And then additionally, I know we use Marriage of Clarity, and I think Mr. Macklin will speak more about that this evening, who also talks about college and career readiness through those portals. The piece coming out of the College Board is a newer piece with the college and career readiness piece. So we're just trying to figure out how we can crosswalk those two to make them work. What we're using AP for there is helping to figure out which advanced placement coursework students have a strong leaning towards being successful in, and then having conversations with our school counselors and our students about like which ones of these will help you with what you think you want to be doing in your future. And I know sometimes it helps kids simply to take a course because they might be good at it and realize, I'm good at it, but I don't like it, or I'm good at it and I love it. I want to keep going in that. And I think that's really what we're hoping to do, is open more doors in that avenue throughout our high schools. And I know that's what Mr. Macklin wants to do at Tech Center also, is making sure we're opening doors for students.
That's awesome. Sorry, guys, I have like a bunch. Okay. Do you know offhand the percentage of underrepresented students who've been awarded the National Merit Scholarship?
I don't have your national merit.
Are you speaking in
The national
Chesterfield or
merit or national
speaking in the?
In Chesterfield.
I do not have that number offhand.
Okay.
No.
And then I just have questions about like the accuracy for the SAT as an assessment for careers, like how, if there's gaps in score reporting or inconsistent scores where a student may jump ahead, slide back year over year. How do we account for inaccuracies like that?
So the inaccuracies in the score reporting year over year.
If a student is not gaining in the traditional way that you demonstrated, like maybe not jumping, what was it, like 20 points a year, I think was the average, and like 50 points a year.
Scores.
Or if a student jumps ahead and slides back, how do we accommodate for that student?
I would say in Chesterfield, one of the things that we have to be aware of is that anytime we take a test, it's a one moment in time. I know I've had a bad test day. I know students have bad test days, and so what we try to do is continue to build them up. That's what we do offer the SAT at school. They get a chance to try that out their junior year in the spring. If it is a bad test day, it's not what they're expecting based upon previous scores, then that means they are able to move into taking that SAT test also again in the summer and fall of their senior year. So that way they can use that to get scholarships and also for moving forward in some college applications. So that one test in that spring that we give really allows students to kind of do almost like a dipstick test of where they are, and then from there decide like, oh, I did better than I thought, I probably shouldn't do any more, or oh, I need to do a little bit more, I had a really bad day, something happened, and I'm gonna go ahead and take this again because I know I need to continue to prepare for that in order to be successful.
Okay. These are more, maybe you'll need to get back to me with these numbers because there's some more numbers that I'm looking for. The percentage of AP class takers that that had successful grades, or I guess AP scores over 2, that those courses were transferred or accepted for college credit. Because I know AP, not all colleges accept all AP courses. So I would be interested in knowing that number. And you mentioned an AP policy. Can you explain that?
That's where I was going to go with that answer too. Okay. So, because that's kind of a two-part question, right? The first thing we want to know is what percentage of AP test takers in Chesterfield earn a qualifying score, right? Which would be potential college credit. And then exactly like you said, the awarding of the college credit depends on where the student takes it, right? Where the student enrolls in college. Some states have an AP credit policy, and Virginia is one of those, where the credit policy will differ from state to state. But the credit policy in Virginia, it was either 2016 or 2017 legislative session where we passed the Virginia AP credit policy, and that is that institutions will have a policy for awarding credit of 3 or greater. And so a tool that we have on the College Board site, and I can provide it so that you can provide it as follow-up, is it's a lookup tool for students that you can look up by subject. You can look up by subject and institution to see what credit will be awarded. And again, and it's also advanced placement, so it will tell what credit is awarded, or if it will be or advanced placement will be awarded. So yes, we will give you 3 credits for this introductory course, and you get to place into the 102 level, the 201 level, whatever it is on that campus.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. And then I had a couple of questions about dual enrollment. And it's pretty much the same question, the percentage of dual enrollment students who are able to use that for college credit.
One of the things that I stated earlier is our goal is to really make sure the courses that we are offering our students now are courses that through the UGCS is automatically transferable to colleges. So therefore they can transfer in, but sometimes what you might find is it might not transfer in as a major credit. Like for instance, I was a biology major. If I took dual enrollment biology, Tech probably would have wanted me to go ahead and take biology with them, but it would have counted as a science elective. So what we find is oftentimes it will transfer, but depending upon the university and the student's major, what it transfers in as, that's the piece where they have to kind of figure that out. And that really is individual based upon what the student's major is and the university or college in which they're attending.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, one to Ms. Heffrons, and that is the AP policy you just referred to, does that apply, that legislation to private schools in Virginia, or is that only our public schools?
That's a great question. So it was for the Virginia public schools, but what we also found was that many of the private schools also adopted a stronger AP credit policy or maybe firmed up their AP credit policy. In the first year of implementation of the AP credit policy, there were some schools that had 36 additional credits that they were awarding just because of the focus on providing a more transparent but also consistent policy for awarding AP credits.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure parents heard that. I knew that answer. Since I had a child that went to private school and one that went to public school, and we saw a difference.
Absolutely.
And they just need to be aware that where you're going, you need to check about how AP is going to be accepted and what scores count. But I also wanted to take a second and make a comment and say that Dr. Daugherty deserves all the credit for all of this SAT, PSAT, because it wasn't until he came here as our superintendent that we began this initiative, and I think it's a phenomenal initiative and definitely worth the funds that we put towards it. So kudos to you, Dr. D.
I would second that. Also that just a fantastic partner, Chesterfield, I have been highlighting and bragging about across the state. Also, Dr. Daugherty has served on our Superintendent's Advisory Council and been a really valuable partner throughout this process, and even through when we all made a swift right turn during the pandemic and were able to adjust and provide greater opportunities for students. So thank you, and thank you all for the support.
I have a question. Thank you so much for that presentation. So I love how accessible that we make SATs and PSATs. The same is not true for AP, right? Because it has a cost. So I'm curious. One thing is helping parents understand that, which you explained, and I thought was great, that you don't have to take the exam in order to get the the credit for taking a rigorous course, which is attractive to colleges. But so what are some, since you work with all school divisions across the state, who are like us dealing with making AP more accessible, what are some of the best practice cases that you've seen in other districts that are really expanding access to all kids?
And I would say before she steps in, I do want to take a moment to make sure everyone here is aware that in Chesterfield, if a student's unable to pay for their AP exam, they can work with their school counselor, and we do AP fee reduction waivers, so that way we help fund those AP tests through various means in order to help make sure students, if they want to be taking an AP test, they have that access to that. We don't want students to feel like they cannot. What we find anytime with fee waivers students have, we don't know for sure until a student comes to us, but we do work with our school counselors to make sure that they're aware and having those conversations with students, especially if it's a student that they know is in need, because our goal is to help our students gain as much as they can while they're with us.
No, I agree. And, what Dr. Daugherty, noticed with the PSAT, SAT, until it's sort of a blanket, it's still a barrier.
So other divisions and expanding access, right? That just want to make sure that I summarize, to AP. So a couple of things. One is sometimes it is expanding access, and certainly in our coursework through course offerings. And so again, using the AP Potential Report, I had focused on the benefit to students because on their score report, it tells their AP potential. A student and parent could use that. I should use the other side of that report is really informative to schools and division leaders, because it will show gaps in either what we call section gaps, like, wow, you have a lot of potential for success in this particular subject, but don't have a lot of classes or sections of that. You could expand sections, or what we call course gaps, so bringing more courses. Chesterfield's leadership has been absolutely fantastic in partnering with ways to think about new offerings. So I gave the example of seminar, where it was a virtual time for us where I met virtually with 2 school leadership teams to make sure that they understood about the seminar offerings, how to best implement it and get support. We offered free professional development opportunities in ELA and math this summer from our pre-AP consultants as well. Expanding beyond using the reporting, which I think Chesterfield does a really good job of. You make sure that you have good data by testing all of the students and then using it. Some school divisions have also implemented, again, AP seminar in an earlier year. We are hosting, I just used the royal we, I am hosting on Monday, November 27th, a statewide webinar so that others know about English 10 AP seminar. I think that's a good place in the 10th grade to prepare students for any advanced academics, certainly those going on to AP, but we'll see some students who go on to dual enrollment, who go on to IB perhaps. So those are the course offerings. Other course offerings that we've made available are AP Pre-Calculus as well, because Pre-Calculus is college level math, and by putting AP behind it, teachers and students have all of the free resources and supports. Other programmatic that divisions or systems are doing is some will pay for all AP exams for students. Some will pay for a couple of AP exams for a student. Some will pay for AP exams that the students are enrolled in. There are different models that divisions have used. Some used ESSER funds to support that. Some have found other ways to fund that support for students at varying levels. But across the state, that absent of a statewide funding program, that is what some divisions have done also. Yeah, you bet.
I'll be really quick with mine, but thank you for the presentation. I had a question. Do we actually, and this is more towards dual enrollment, do we have more of a demand than we can actually provide?
I think it probably depends upon the course, to be frank. I think there's some courses where we are under enrolling students in dual enrollment where perhaps it just doesn't have as much interest. And I think we find that in some of our courses in general, where we perhaps as adults know the benefits of it, but trying to convince kids of the benefits a little bit different. I do find one of the things, the areas where we most are trying to find staff members, of course, are dual enrollment English. That's that's probably our largest segment where students are taking dual enrollment coursework for us. And dual enrollment math. That's really where we're trying to make sure that we're continuing to build teachers, because we recognize every time we build a teacher, I have to be dual enrollment and be ready to be credentialed for that. Sometimes people want to retire and move on, or they move out of the district.
How dare they?
I know, what are they thinking? But we are consistently really trying to work on making sure that we're building up that pipeline so that way students who are interested in dual enrollment are able to get into that. Also, please keep in mind that sometimes because the teachers have to be credentialed, schools have the best laid plans, but if a teacher suddenly moves out of state in August, our ability to then rehire for a dual enrollment teacher really shifts, and we have to make adjustments at that point. But I know for most of the high schools, one of their first things is, if they can find a teacher who's able to teach that dual enrollment, that's always what they're looking for, because they want to have as much flexibility as possible to offer students all the courses that they're interested in, because we really do believe our high school schedule should be student-driven, which is why we want to make sure we offer multiple dual enrollment courses and multiple advanced placement courses, because both of those fit a need for students in what they're looking forward to when they're looking towards graduation and their next steps.
Great. And do we have any type of incentive for some of our teachers to encourage them to go and get this extra endorsement?
We do tuition reimbursement in cohorts for in order to help get them for some of the coursework, depending upon it. And we also do pay our dual enrollment teachers an additional stipend when they're teaching a dual enrollment class, because they are viewed as both Brightpoint faculty and CCPS faculty, and so therefore they do have to make sure they're keeping up with Brightpoint Canvas, Brightpoint Gradebook, and doing some professional development through the university. And we want to make sure we honor that fact that that is additional workload for them. So we give them a stipend. So that way when they do choose to come and teach dual enrollment with us, and they continue to do so, they get that annual stipend from us.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have one question and a really quick comment. First, thank you for your presentation. So in the percentages you gave, it was 67% for AP pass rate for Chesterfield County. What is the state percentage pass?
So I don't have that for this last reporting period. We had just put out the national report, and so I'll follow up with it for
Okay.
you.
That'd be great.
We also because we also report by cohort.
What's the national percent?
I don't have it because I
You don't-
have it by
okay.
subject. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just from having a student that just graduated in May and took advantage of AP and dual enrollment classes, we were very grateful when he started college he was one of those 503 numbers down there. So he has said that the adjustment into college has been an easy transition, and he accredits that for his AP and dual enrollment as well. So thank you. Next, we have a presentation on the 2024 graduation schedule. Also, Dr. Merriman.
just hang up here. I'm going to talk about the next step. So we just talked about what we have to do to get kids ready while they're in high school. In order for them to go to their next steps, our goal is to get them to graduate, and we have to talk about where and when those graduations will be held. So thank you for allowing me to be here to share this happy news. I know our schools are anxious, and the seniors are so anxious to hear about our dates and times for graduations. So as you know, last year in May of 2023, we were able to graduate a little over 4,500 graduates at Virginia State and VCU. So we held our graduations there. And we're looking forward to seeing the class of 2024 graduate in May of 2024. And we have senior class sizes ranging anywhere to a bit over 600 at Thomas Dale to a bit less than 100 at Carver College and Career Academy. So one of the things we've really tried to do is make sure that we're looking at how do we meet those students' needs. So there will be some adjustments on the graduation schedule due to that piece. If you notice here, we are doing 5 days of graduations at VSU and VCU, with Matoaka graduating at Virginia State on Monday, May 20th in the morning. That is in their backyard. It is a common, comfortable place for most of our Matoaka staff. They're very excited to be there. And Thomas Dale will be graduating at VCU that same afternoon, but at 3 o'clock. So those are slightly different times, and you'll see for the rest of the week. Because we did want to make sure we allowed enough time for all of us to go from one place to another. So we would be able to be there to watch both of those graduations. There are 2 graduations each of those days. All of our comprehensive high schools will graduate by the 24th. And if you notice, Carver's College and Career Academy graduation will be held at CTC's auditorium on Tuesday the 28th. For those of us who've participated in their graduations for years, they have a much smaller graduating class. It's a much smaller school. We really felt like doing it within one of our own spaces in our auditorium would really allow them to have a more intimate graduation where it was not quite so expansive of empty space. It was difficult sometimes in those larger arenas that fit 4,000 people when we're having a graduation for much less. We're really looking forward to doing it there in the Hall Street Auditorium, so that way our students can really be celebrated by their families there. We've also done some rearranging to remove evening graduation, so families don't have to navigate the graduation areas during those evening times. These changes can have some impacts on our budget because we're hosting 2 graduations at different venues on the same day, and we're also hosting over 6 days versus our previous time of 4, but we're really looking forward to making sure that we have a graduation schedule that works for our students and their families, because that's really the main focus of this. I know for myself, and I think for all of you guys, graduations are such a happy time. It is so exciting to see those faces and those students cross the stage and to hear the excitement in all their families' voices in those stands. So making sure that we have a graduation set up for all of them that fits their needs is really important. And that's our graduation schedule for this coming May. We're super excited about it. I know this principals are super excited to get the exam schedule out for in the spring. The seniors might not be as excited to hear about their exam schedules, but those will be coming out in the next few weeks too, now that this has been settled and it's up for you guys for the consent agenda later on today.
Thank you very much.
You're
Board
welcome.
members, any questions? Very good. Thank you, Dr. Merriman.
Of course, thank you guys.
Next, we have a presentation on the Virginia All-In Plan from Dr. Pope.
Good afternoon, Board Chair, Vice Chair, members, and Dr. Daugherty. Thank you for your interest in this topic, Virginia All-In, and how that is being implemented here across CCPS. You can see on this slide the topics that we will run through on this deck. In September, for our public who may not be aware, the Governor and General Assembly dedicated $418 million to school divisions across the Commonwealth to improve attendance, literacy, and learning acceleration through high-intensity tutoring. Included was a recommendation to school divisions to utilize funds received in the 70, 20, and 10% distribution shown here on this slide. Further recommendations detailed were also given to school divisions, and that included a VDOE division playbook shown here, through VDOE information meetings, through memos and newsletter articles, and through an FAQ document that has been updated several times. As stated in our parent letter that was sent through the Parent View portal to our parents on November 3rd, to students who qualify for this additional support, Chesterfield County does support the VDOE's commitment to partner with parents, and we hold the same goal of guiding students through a very successful year. Upon notification of funding and the All In initiative, school division staff members came together and began the work that is represented here on this timeline. You can see we are now over to the far right in the November to May section. Our parents have received letters of notification if their student fell in the qualifying bands for this opportunity. We are right now updating the school board, and currently our schools are at work employing attendance coaches and coach leads, and we will soon be beginning the official 18 weeks of tutor monitoring. We also have on this slide deck linked, and it is available on the VDOE public website, the CCPS all-in plan that was approved. As VDOE shared with school divisions the tenets of attendance improvement, we were fully in agreement with the Johns Hopkins model shown here. CCPS, as part of our approved plan, developed and received the approval for the devotion of 9 attendance staff members to be phased in over 3 years to address the high absenteeism that schools across the Commonwealth and the nation are experiencing. The VDOE also recommended funding be devoted to expanding or accelerating the Virginia Literacy Act. While CCPS is well underway with its elementary literacy work, we planned and received approval to earmark all-in funds for the anticipated needs noted in red here. That would be the potential hiring of reading specialists, helping those who may be in the pipeline and interested in this position to receive endorsement through tuition support. And then as the VDOE provides the middle school materials list, and the 3 through 8 intervention materials list, we will compare those lists with what we have and consider any potential purchases with these funds. The VDOE also communicated to school divisions recommendations shown here for division tutoring supports. These recommendations include focusing resources on acceleration, focusing on grade level content while addressing unfinished learning, having flexibility in design, but remembering the importance of high dosage, high intensity, small group tutoring. And very important to us here in Chesterfield County, we were able to implement, since it is mid-year, not quite mid-year, but we're in the school year, we were given the flexibility and approval to be able to use the online tutoring resources that our central office specialists, our instructional designers in our schools, our teachers, and our students are already familiar with. To summarize who has been identified by the Virginia Department of Education as benefiting from additional tutoring, you can see here, we are focusing on math and reading, either or both areas for a student. We are looking at, for grades 4 through 8, the spring 2023 SOL score, and we are looking at the Virginia Growth Assessment administered in the fall of 2023 for our grade 3 students. Students using those indicators either could have been flagged as at risk or low proficient. That could be for our students who received an SOL score up to 448. And I know some of our families celebrate that score. I know we have gifted students who receive that score. We have students in honors and acceleration who may receive that score because it is one test score on one given day. So I know sometimes parents think, this letter of additional support may not align with what I perceive my student's position or achievement to be, but we just wanted to point out that we did follow the exact guidelines we were given, and we didn't decide to not invite students. We invited all of our students who met those guidelines. Of course, you can see if a student failed the SOL, that would put the student in the at-risk or not proficient category there on the right. For our students, we will be using at the elementary school level Dreambox and Lexia Core 5, products that they are familiar with. And at the middle school level, Alex and Lexia Power Up as our digital learning tools. Additionally, our very successful online tutoring vendor, Stride, that this board has heard about before, will be expanded to grades 3 through 5 for this all-in initiative. Our tutoring support structure is represented here. A notification letter, as I mentioned earlier, was shared with parents on November 3rd through Parent View, offering those students who qualified for this extra support the right to have this support with the support of a coach. The coach is identified here in the green section, and coaches will begin reaching out to students and families right after Thanksgiving. What does the coach do, you may ask? Well, the coach is the person in the school building that builds that relationship with the student, sets up training on any of the digital tools previously mentioned if the student has that need, communicates with parents about digital tools and learning goals, supports the classroom teacher. When the coach notices that a student may be on a digital tool but still struggling, that's a great conversation to have with the classroom teacher to talk about differentiation, some additional instruction. And then sometimes we realize that being in a digital tool or even with the classroom teacher's help, that may not be enough, and that's when the coach would also potentially book stride tutoring sessions for the student at the convenience of the family or during the school day. We also have, beyond that work of the coach, in each building one coach lead that also has the same number of students that they work with, but then serves as an additional support to the other coaches in the building, as well as a liaison to the school administration and the central office level. And then centrally, we have an expert that knows the ins and outs of each of those digital tools that we've identified. So that gets us back to our topics listing, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. Board members, is there any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
So I realize that, part of this presentation is a response to a governor's initiative. And so we may not have the flexibility that I want, but I want to put out a couple thoughts that I had. And part of it is I just got off a call with the First Lady, Suzanne Youngkin, had a call with faith leaders. And I was also at a VDH Health Equity Office conference a couple weeks ago. And the reason for attendance, which is part of this initiative, is mental health. And so I'm trying to process what I'm hearing in a number of spaces, but it doesn't seem connected to this tutoring initiative. And I'm worried. I was speaking with a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, and she said to make it clear to everybody out there, imagine a day, right? You're a 9-year-old on Thursday. They went to school, and school's okay academically, but they're getting help face-to-face with their reading, and that's what the research shows, that face-to-face is the best instruction, and that makes you feel good, and you get screen time at home if you pay attention and you're making progress, and you get to play soccer with your buddies during recess. And then the next day you wake up and you're told you can't leave the house, you can't go to school, and you have no idea when this is going to end. And adults have had experiences in their life, right? They've learned resiliency. They understand unexpected situations, but a 9-year-old does not. And to so many of our kids that are not showing up, as far as they're concerned, it could all be gone tomorrow. They're still living in that mindset. And we pushed back against the last governor when the restrictions were frustrating, and we were trying to get kids back and trying to follow the ever-changing rules and do it safely, but without all the resources. And I hear our kids are behind, but I am also hearing this looming mental health crisis that is getting worse. And I think for our kids, it really is connected to that moment where things were secure, and the next day, everything was upside down. And so I'm, and all the data that's out there, the increasing student threats to themselves, others, the rise specifically identified in suicide in Black youth, and on and on and on. So I guess just at what point do we point out that this might not be what is going to help our kids? Because, and you know, what Suzanne Yunkin said, you know, mental health tied to being in school, being seen authentically for who they are, you know, the sense of belonging. If on top of all of this, you get a letter that says you're failing in school when you thought you were succeeding and you need tutoring, maybe it's working with other superintendents to say, this isn't working, we need to go back to the other initiative, which is, you know, the governor's brought a lot of attention to the mental health crisis. What might, along those lines, help our kids more than tutoring in a time of stretched resources? And while our tutoring program is great, you know, the research shows that online tutoring doesn't work for literacy. So again, there's a mismatch between the Virginia Literacy Plan and so I guess I would just encourage us to take notes and communicate and kind of push back in the way that we also did during the pandemic, and say this isn't working for us. So I'm hearing a lot from parents, and I realize that we didn't write this plan, but I just would encourage us.
Madam Chair, we're excited about the plan. We've got a different mindset on this. We think it's going to work, not that it's not going to work, but this is not the only thing we're doing for our students. And so to think that this is all that's occurring when, you know, we're talking to parents every day, trying to make sure kids are in school, making sure they get counseling. But let's remember, this was approved by the Department of Education, who's our boss in instruction and the guidelines. And they like the plan so much that they tell the people about the plan. So we think the materials that we have in the place, the people we have in the buildings, are going to be very successful. A year or whenever the state finally has an accountability program that says, okay, here's our kids now, we'll look at it again. There's a lot of balls in the air with this plan, and I commend our schools and our district staff for getting this together, that all these pieces that all of a sudden were put onto us by Richmond, we've mastered the point of moving forward. So I'm excited about what we're going to do. And the programs that we're using, our people know it's not stressful to them. And we've seen success with the programs that we have. That's why we have the programs. So.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
And Dr. Dougherty kind of alluded to successful measures and that maybe there'll be an accountability, hopefully there'll be an accountability measure at some point. And that was my question, is how are we going to monitor student progress and success along the way?
Well, one of our goals in designing this was to try to keep it as manageable by our school personnel as possible, because we want them engaged and speaking with students and building relationships with students. So one of the things that we've strategized, and it's really groundbreaking for us, it's a record-keeping system that we've developed that will be shared consistently across all schools. And weekly, what we're looking at are those recorded contacts with the students and the parents, the amount of time that a student attempted in a digital product, and then the progress gained in that product weekly. Then every 6 weeks, we zoom out a little bit, and we look at the division level, and we look at the whole school level to see if we're pleased with the progress. So it's methodical, it's consistent, it's being collected in the same way across each school, and we're trying to kind of, I say to my staff, automagically populate as much of it as possible where we can to keep our staff from sitting and staring at computer screens and pulling numbers of student progress and actually talking to students and helping them with that relationship and figuring out where their struggle points may be, and if a classroom teacher or a stride session may be a better answer so that they can move forward. So there's a weekly as well as an every 6-week look at the progress of each student and the school and the central office level.
So another question, but you go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say, I think you took an impossible task and an impossible time frame and very quickly turned out an amazing product. I love what you've written here. I love what you've done. The governor's office gave you guys just a very short time frame to answer this. Said, "This, tell me how you're going to address this all in policy." I mean, new requirement, and we needed, I think it was ridiculous, like 4 or 6 weeks later or something. It was very
It
quick.
was an aggressive timeline, is how I
Very
like to phrase
aggressive,
it.
and I can't imagine the number of hours that you burned doing this. So I think it's phenomenal, and I do know that when we focus on things like attendance, schools can do phenomenal work with children, and the motivation and the incentives. And if you haven't had a chance to look at what Chalkley Elementary School's doing, I just happen to know because I know the AP there, they're killing it. And they've set attendance goals, and they are having reward parties, and they're having all kinds of awesome motivational things to get the kids involved and buying into this. And so it works. And all of that is good for mental health. And all of that is going to help our students feel good about themselves, and feel good about the progress that they're making. So I'm excited, and I just commend you for the tremendous amount of work you did in a very short amount of time.
Staff has really come together on this one.
You're their leader. You get to take the praise.
You have one quick question.
Yes.
What has been the, I guess, approximate acceptance rate since the letters went out?
So on the one slide, we kind of indicated where we were right now in the process. And as far as our staff, we have 100% of our leads named. That's 1 lead per school. So that's amazing because we start lead training in 2 days. So just in time. With our coaches at the middle and elementary school levels, we're at 58% hired, and those names just keep flooding in as people consider and they look at the requirements and our expectations and decide to raise their hand and really step up to be that relationship coach with each of our students. I would say that with our families, we have under 2%, which is, I'm sorry, slightly over 2%, which is just under 500 families that have decided that they don't really need a coach to support, but they are involved as a family and will continue to, work through any unfinished learning. But they can always opt back in. It's just a matter of writing their principal a note to say, hey, maybe I've changed my mind and I would like that extra coach for my students. So we've been very pleasantly surprised at that very low opt-out from our families.
Good. Thank you.
I did have a question about the 9 people. I appreciate the link to our plan that will be hired to help with attendance. Will they have any mental health background, or sort of what is the criteria? Will they be social workers, or because maybe that's a way to bring the mental health component in to this?
So that portion of the plan and the requirements for those individuals is really not under my team or my team's domain. So I think we can get you some additional information on that. But you have the wrong person in front of the mic to give you accurate details on that right now.
And I do will reiterate Ms. Bailey's that it was a phenomenal and creative way to turn things around. Just maybe not
We're going to be up
missing the
and
mental
moving in
health piece.
December. So
Thanks.
anything else?
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Next, we have an update on special education from Dr. Gold.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Doherty. Good afternoon. I'm here tonight to give you a special education update, and this is the agenda that we'll be following tonight, the topics that we'll cover. So we will continue our data-driven focus for fiscal year '24. And building on the work that we completed in 2023, the Special Education Department has continued to provide ongoing professional development throughout the summer of 2023. We had a lot of teachers come in for voluntary professional development, and also we are off and running for the 23-24 school year as well. Through the provision of services last year, we were able to learn a lot about the needs of our coordinators of special education in each of our schools, as well as our special education teachers. We are pulling back and focusing more on supporting CSEs for better preparation for meetings instead of attending as many meetings, and then providing support around targeted instructional support and improved outcomes for students with disabilities. We have received feedback from the VDOE for the special education program review, as well as the special education fiscal audit around the IDEA grant. Implementation of action steps in both of those reviews is in full swing for program review, and plans of actions are being developed based on the findings from both of those reports. And as I've completed my first year as special education director, we have found that feedback from the VDOE to be very critical in guiding our next steps, both programmatically as well as fiscally. We were, as you know, selected to participate in the VDOE's cyclical special education program review last school year, and it really provided us with an opportunity to reflect on our practices, as well as developing those action plans that we talked about a little bit earlier. Our staff has been participating in school improvement meetings along with the Department of School Improvement, and we will continue to review our state performance plan indicators and meet with teams to most effectively make change for those schools in need of the greatest support. One thing we also did as a result of our learning from last year is to reorganize the Department of Special Education and adopt a results-driven accountability framework. And so RDA support, results-driven accountability, or RDA, supports division level improvement in all schools, with focusing more on those schools that need the most support. We've also reorganized our leaders in the special education department, less elementary and secondary, and looked more at a strength-based approach to providing support to our schools. We are fortunate to have been able to fill some vacant positions with math and literacy specialists. Our literacy specialist began this summer, and our math specialist will begin in December to support schools to close that achievement gap. We also have others focusing on students who are on alternate curriculum. We're also looking at, have increased our team, reorganized to increase the support to our schools around communication and environmental supports. So we are trying to move away from behavioral supports and talk about communication supports, because that is what behavior is. It is communication. And so we have some expertise in that area in our department, and we are able to deploy those out to support our school teams. Of course, we are always have instructional support, and we've also hired a grants management specialist to join the special education department. The priorities that we have identified for this school year is, again, working around results-driven accountability, aligning our services to schools PK to 12. So we are focusing on early childhood, secondary transition, again, literacy and math, instructional support, communication support, also compliance, and improving the continuum of services. This is all based on those state performance plan indicators on which we receive feedback from the VDOE each school year. We're looking at inclusive practices, PK to 12 as well. Last year, many of our schools completed the Inclusive Practices Survey that was required by the Virginia Department of Education, and we're going to be working on the results from those self-assessments to create a plan for the division with a focus on early childhood special education, and then those students who receive instruction on the SOL curriculum. Again, really focusing on that communication and environmental supports. We have, in that reorganization, been able to build on the expertise of some of our staff and give them additional time in their schedules to be able to support our schools. We've noticed a trend in students who have additional support needs, more intensive support needs, and so we needed to reorganize our staff to better support that need. Lastly, we're looking at our special education staffing model. I continue the strong collaboration between the Department of Management and Budget to strengthen our special education staffing model to ensure that those staff allocations accurately reflect the needs of our students as identified in their IEPs. And in closing, I just wanted to share some positive things that are going on in secondary transition. We've reorganized that office as well. We start our students out with school-based enterprises, and you can see some pictures here of some of our students working at the middle school and the high school level. We've also started at the elementary school level too, with building those enterprises for getting that employment experience for our students. We also have students out into the community where they learn at school and then apply those skills in workplace environments. And we currently have students, as you can see in these pictures, at the Holiday Inn Express, at Marco's Pizza, and Tablespoons Bakery. We do have students working in other locations as well, but these are just to name a few. And then finally, we have students at St. Francis Hospital in our Project Search program, which is an amazing program for our students. The students who are there rotate through 3 work experiences or internships throughout the school year. We have a 100% employment rate, and that is the goal. When you talk about results-driven accountability, we look at those decisions that we make early on in a child's educational career, and this is what we hope for: employment, helping them reach their post-secondary goals, whether they be employment or whether they be college or career. And we're back to our agenda slide, and now I'll take any questions or comments from you.
Thank you very much. Board members, is there any discussion?
Thanks.
Saffron?
What is the Chesterfield Inclusive Practices Action Plan?
It's not been developed. The
Okay.
survey, we'll
Thank
have
you.
to have a team that will get together and develop the action plan.
Glad I didn't miss that, because
Pardon?
I'm glad I didn't miss it, because I was, yeah, okay.
No, you didn't miss anything.
And what areas of special education staffing right now are most critical in need of staffing? Strength? You see, you want to strengthen the staffing?
We have a lot of teachers who are provisionally licensed.
Okay.
We have annual subs, where those are the areas. We have a lot of vacancies as well. So I can get you those numbers, but I don't have them.
Just wondering just what positions that we had staffing opportunities in.
We have anywhere, PK to 12.
Right.
Yeah, early childhood special education up to 12. We have more students to serve at early childhood this year, and we do have some vacancies there as well.
Thank you.
I loved your presentation. I really appreciate that it isn't everything's great here, but acknowledging a growth mindset and the work that we have to do. I think that can be really hard to do. It requires being vulnerable, and so I really commend you for that. And I'm excited about the work that we're going to do. If I had 2 questions, I appreciate you mentioning, behaviors, communication. On that note, what kind of staffing needs do we have so that we can, hear that? And then 2, and this is really more for budget going forward, that we have to find a way to treat these teachers as we, treat bus drivers and the aides, any hard to staff area, paying for endorsements, extra bonus, or it just maybe doing the same kind of like roundtable deep dive to like what will it take, because this some of our most vulnerable students, and I'm sure we can find a market solution for a market problem, right? Kent staff, so let's entice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation on the FY24 revised operating budget from Mr. Meister.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Dr. Doherty, after much time and patience, I finally come to you with amendments to the FY24 state budget and the impacts to CCPS. So if you recall, the state approved amendments to the state budget and the governor signed off on those on September 14th. Roughly 1 month after that, on October 12th, we were provided with what we call the calc tool. This was released to all the LEAs across the state. This is what really tells us the impact of the state budget. Of course, that was 2 days after the October school board meeting, so here I am in November to talk to you about changes today, as well as this evening with the memo to ultimately appropriate these funds. If you recall, when I became evident that the state would not timely finalize these amendments, we came to you in May with several adjustments to the plan, both in what we expected the state amendments to be so we could start the school year ultimately with minimal disruptions. As it turned out, those adjustments that we put into our projections for the state revenue turned out to be pretty much spot on. When you think about what the state has talked about and what the press has talked about, most of the budget discussions have been compared to what we've called the skinny budget. This is what the state put forward as essentially a stopgap measure so they could start the fiscal year. That skinny budget, if you remember, was below both the governor's proposed budget from December as well as both the House and Senate version that came out later in the budget process. So the budget we came to you with in May wound up being a reasonable and appropriate budget, but at the end of the day, we were a bit throwing darts. We happened to land in a reasonable spot. But what that means is there wasn't a significant increase in ongoing revenue from the state relative to what this board ultimately approved in May. There was, however, as Dr. Pope just talked about, meaningful one-time funds that were provided in addition to the ongoing funds in terms of roughly $22.5 million of all-in funding. These funds, Dr. Pope has talked about a little bit. I'll talk about them a little bit more a little later, really focusing on tutoring, literacy, and chronic absenteeism. There's one other important piece to this puzzle that I have to talk about here as we look to amend the budget, and that's related to enrollment. The last several years, we've seen greater than 1,000 students per annum growth. This year, that growth rate appears to have slowed. That is a good news from several vantage points in terms of being able to ultimately catch up to some of the growth that this county has seen, but it does create a short-term revenue hole. Our estimates are about $6 million in state revenue. That ultimate figure will be determined based on not the September enrollment, but ultimately the March ADM forecast or figures that will come out obviously this spring. As we go through this discussion, we'll talk about a few actions to address this shortfall, but I'm happy to say they won't result in any material changes to operations as they've largely been items we've observed in actuals to date, and we can continue on as we would have regardless. Rather have more money, but there won't be a material impact to school operations. So taking a step back and looking at the state budget, what was in there, I mentioned the $418 million, or Dr. Pope did, about the all-in funding. We've talked about learning loss, absenteeism, literacy as part of that. One thing that wasn't mentioned in Dr. Pope's presentation is those funds are not required to be spent this fiscal year. These funds have a little bit longer lifetime. They go through FY26, so we have the remainder of this year and 2 other school years to liquidate those funds. I'll put forward in this presentation, as well as what we ultimately sent to the DOE, a plan to spend those over those roughly 2.5 years that will meet that need. The state made a couple of other primary adjustments to the plan this year, and several other smaller changes, but the 2 big ones were really around further reducing the impact of Great Recession era support caps. If you recall, the support cap caps the amount of funds we get for support positions. This moved from 21 per 1,000 students up to 24 per 1,000 students. Support cap is still there. 24 is not the end of the line, but they did take a meaningful step along that path. The second got a fair amount of press, which would be to add about 2% salary increase beginning on January 1 for teachers and staff. This would be, if you remember, on top of the 5% that was in the state's budget as a baseline. I must stop and applaud the board at this point because this 5% plus 2% aligns with the budget that you ultimately approved. You recognize the importance of teacher and staff pay at the time, both all the way from Dr. Doherty's original presentation of the budget in January through the amendments in the May. And what we have done is included the full 7%, 5% from the base, 2% from this additional state funding in our budget to date, starting from the start of the fiscal year in June, which means that we have essentially funded an extra 6 months of this 2% raise over and above what the state is provided. So putting some numbers around this, if you recall, the school board adopted an about $890.5 million budget in May. The ongoing impact of the current amendment was in line with our expectations. You'll notice only about a $50,000 difference in that state funding. I mentioned the enrollment impact. That's a little bit over a $6 million impact here, resulting from the lower growth than what had been previously assumed. There are a few dollars in local funds to offset that based on some recent trends we've seen there, leading to a revised budget that we'll talk about in terms of ongoing operations of $884.8 million. In addition to that, we of course have the all-in funding that we'll need to talk about as well, making the total figure over $900 million. I've mentioned enrollment a few times. Here's what this looks like. You will notice that previously we've seen several years of greater than 1,000 student growth per annum. This year we're looking at so far about 100, give or take, depending on the metric. This happens to include pre-K. The CCPS planning team is digging into this new trend. This seems to be in line with other districts, both locally and across the state. If you'll notice, the Times-Dispatch article that was out a couple days ago spoke to many of these similar trends as well, ranging from birth rates to declines in certificates of occupancy. Within Chesterfield, we've seen an uptick in multifamily housing, which tends to have a lower percentage of student age kids in it than single family, which had predominantly been the growth factor recently. So as we look at this trend and the impact of that, you may say, okay, we've have fewer kids, so we can save a fair amount of money. That's where this comes in, because fewer kids means fewer dollars, right? But what I will remind the board here, when we made those adjustments in May to level our budget at that $890 million level, we took out about $6 million in staff costs at that time. That turned out to be relatively fortunate given this enrollment trends, as we're not overstaffed. We're looking at things across the district, and we are able to essentially absorb that $6 million staff reduction in our normal run rate. And that was decisions that were made in May that we look back on and feel pretty good about. This slower growth will also obviously have some long-term implications that we will need to look at. We'll continue to address this. We are behind in catching up to the growth historically. We'll need to continue to watch this to make sure that we are in fact in line, and I'm confident that our CIP and other trends will appreciate a slower growth rate for at least this year, if not going forward. So what does this all mean? What are we going to do to balance the budget given that lower enrollment? We'll start with the $890.5 million that was approved by this board in May. The first line on here is lower utilities. If you think back where we were mid-2022, inflation was 9-ish%. We've come down a fair amount. The most recent report rolled out today was 3.3% as an example. So we've seen significantly lower inflation over this period. We're feeling very confident that we can pull out $2 million of that inflation adjustment that we had in there given recent trends. Reading specialists, Dr. Pope just talked about reading specialists as part of the all-in initiative. That was one of those initiatives that was both in the House and Senate versions in different forms. We took that as a sign that we should move forward and begin the process of increasing reading specialists across the district. We've done that. The funding did not align with the direct operating budget. The funding came in through this one-time all-in funding for the next few years. So we're going to shift those reading specialists to that funding source while that funding is available. There's a little bit of change in the timing of our debt service based on when ultimately the referendum bonds were put forward. We have about a $1.8 million savings that's strictly timing on that debt service bill that we'll be able to take to help offset some of this year. A little bit lower enrollment in summer school. We'll have to account for that. That came off on the revenue side as well. We'll take this about $400,000 off on the expense side. Keep in mind, we still have one more summer of ESSER-supported summer school, so we'll make sure as we go forward that we'll be able to maintain same level of exceptional service within our summer school, despite this reduction in the operating budget going forward. And lastly, vacancies is obviously a thing. We're going to balance the budget here with the remaining about $750,000 of vacancy that we've observed year to date. That puts the new revised budget, as I mentioned previously, at about $884.8 million plus the 22.6 of all-in funding going forward. I won't spend much time on this side. This shows the revenue and expenses balanced at that $884 million, and we'll add that $22.65 million for all-in. Dr. Pope spent a lot of time on all-in already. I won't spend much time on this. This is a repeat of her slide. I will remind you that has been asked to be spent, and we've gotten approval to spend that at 70% tutoring, 20% related to literacy, and 10% on absenteeism. What that looks like financially is this slide. You can see our current plans suggest that we'll spend just over $6 million of that this year and a little over $8 million each of the next 2 years to meet those needs. Keep in mind, getting the funds mid-year this year, it's a little harder to ramp up, which is why you see more of the funding in the out years than necessarily in year one. We will likely not spend this all in FY24 as this suggests. We will ask the board and the Board of Supervisors, however, to appropriate the full $22 million now so that we can have that in our plans. Should we either spend more, and we'll have to carry that over as part of our normal year-end process as we go forward. So this brings us to our summary slide. This evening, I'll ask you to support Memo 158-23, which has the changes that we've talked about today, as well as a minor adjustment to ARGS's revenue assumption here, additional revenue for them of about $21,000 as part of this evening's agenda item. So with that, I will pause for comments and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Meister. Board members, is there any discussion?
I have a couple questions. Hi, Bob.
Morning or afternoon.
Okay, so the 2% additional pay for teachers that was funded with the $54.6 million from the state, what is the CCPS portion of that? Do you know? Or what would it be?
Not off the top of my head. I think it's less than 10 million, obviously. 3 million maybe, I think it's. But keep in mind, the funding that came in this year would be only for 6 months of this year because the funding started in January for the raise. But I can get you that number offline. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, I guess I'm just, I mean, if we've already gone to, if we have state funds for an additional 2% raise.
No. So what
yell at
we
me.
did in our
I'm just trying to
budget
understand.
was, we've assumed 7% as part of our FY24 budget.
Okay.
Part of that was under the assumption that the state would come forward with the extra 2% to fund it,
Okay,
right? So
And
they
they-
came forward with the extra 2%,
half.
but it started in January, so we got half of that 2%.
thank you. Calm down. Calm down. All right, Bob, that's it. Thank you. That's all, that was it. That was all. That was easy, easy peasy, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad to finally put this one to bed and right in time for the next one.
We'll celebrate this evening.
We will celebrate this evening, that's right. All right. Next, we have a presentation on year-round schools from Dr. High. actually
good
from
afternoon.
Dr.
Yeah.
Fulgason.
I was just going to say, I'm not Dr. High, I am Dr. Fogelsong, and I'm joined this afternoon, thank you, by our principals, Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Rudd from Falling Creek and Bellwood Elementary. Good afternoon, Mrs. Coker, Ms. Haynes, Dr. Doherty, and school board members. We are here to discuss the future of our year-round school schedule for Bellwood and Falling Creek Elementary. Today, I will briefly review the background and data information, and our principals are going to share with you some of the challenges to the schedule, potential benefits to returning to the traditional calendar, and some considerations, as well as our recommendations. So our initial goals for the year-round school implementation was to increase student opportunities for academic support and enrichment, reduce summer learning loss with a July start date, and 4 intercession opportunities for students who have various instructional needs that could be supported by their teachers. And then regular breaks that occur at intervals throughout the year to support teacher and student focus. Our Office of Research and Evaluation conducted evaluations in fall of 2021 and fall of 2022. In our first evaluation, students in year-round schools demonstrated slightly more fall-to-fall growth on our MAP reading than did similar students attending traditional calendar schools. However, there was no difference in the growth on the math. And only Bellwood Elementary contributed to the year-round school data for this evaluation. In the second evaluation, students in year-round schools experienced no difference in our fall to spring growth compared to students attending traditional calendar schools. Both Bellwood and Falling Creek contributed to that year-round data. And for reference, those comparison schools included students from Bensley, Chalkley, and Hopkins. And across both evaluations, there is some evidence suggesting that the year-round school schedule may have a small negative impact on students' attendance during the first 30 days of school. Additional data was collected during the 22-23 school year, and an analysis of the reading and math SOL assessments found that there is no difference in growth from spring 2022 to spring 2023 between students who attended year-round schools and those similar students attending traditional calendar schools. An analysis of the spelling subtest from our phonological awareness literacy screening, or the PALS test, found that students who attended year-round schools grew slightly less than did similar students attending our traditional schools. An analysis of students attending intersession attendance data from the 22-23 school year found that across both schools, an average of 152 students were invited to attend each of the 4 intersessions, and an average of 118 students actually attended each intersession, yielding an overall attendance rate of about 78%. This suggesting that schools were effective in encouraging identified students to attend that intersession programming.
At this time, I'm going to share some of the challenges to the year-round school calendar. So the first challenge is that student attendance in July and August, prior to traditional start date, we find that students miss a lot of the first 30 days of school. And we found that students travel to their native countries, and also that parents tend to hold students out because they have students in middle and high school, so the schedules aren't fitting them the same way. The second is the assessment schedule that's not aligned with the traditional schools. We take the assessment at the end of July, early August. Traditional, they tend to test at the end of August, early September. So we're into Q2 once teacher reports are out. If the schedule was aligned, then that way we could use those teacher reports to drive our instruction. Teachers and staff attending school-wide PD opportunities. So we find that professional development, we don't have much time built into our schedule, but oftentimes PD opportunities during the summer, teachers tend to take advantage of that time. Being that we start in July, it's hard for our teachers to attend those PD opportunities as well. Oftentimes, there's not a lot of time to calibrate after the school year. Once the school year ends, we have roughly 4 weeks before new teachers enter the building. And out of the 4 weeks, at least 2 of the weeks are spent just trying to close out the previous school year. The last challenge is recruiting and retaining staff. For at least Falling Creek, recruiting staff has been one of the main challenges for us. Right now, we have a significant amount of vacancies, and that's contributed to the calendar. Oftentimes, when we interview candidates, we can't even get them to at least come to the table to have an interview because they say that the year-round calendar doesn't fit their schedule or their kids' schedule. So these are just a few of the challenges that I wanted to share as far as the year-round calendar.
Good evening. Some of the benefits of returning to the traditional calendar we feel would be the student attendance should improve because families will have their children on the same schedule. And we found, at least at Bellwood, that often the vacations were planned until like through July and August as well. So the kids would miss a week at a time for vacations. Testing schedules would align throughout the school division, such as at our SOL testing in the beginning of the year and our PALS testing. And the rollout of instructional materials and resources will be aligned throughout all the elementary schools. Teachers will be able to participate in the countywide professional learning day during teacher work week, as well as attend conferences as they become available, and as well as new teacher orientation. Additional time to collaborate with leadership team over the summer, as well as our own principal colleagues. And recruitment and retention of staff should improve due to the aligned schedule with the rest of the county. So some areas of consideration in returning to the traditional calendar would be the continuation of the enrichment opportunities for our students to receive that they've been getting during intersessions, such as like art classes and cooking classes that they normally cannot afford to pay for. And to look at funding for before and after school tutoring opportunities, and a communication plan to families, staff, and the community to include daycares and for both of our communities. Staffing, some staff have shared that they may transfer to other schools if we go back to the traditional calendars. And the contract change for teachers switching from year-round school pay to the pay schedule to traditional pay schedule, which finance has talked to them about working with.
So based on this information that we've shared and that data, we are recommending that the students at Bellwood and Falling Creek, that you consider returning them to the traditional school calendar for the 24-25 school year.
Thank you all for that presentation. Board members, any questions or comments? I have a couple questions real quick. If we could go to slide 5, I think it was the third bullet point. Didn't know if we had that data broken out by the different schools. It was talking about, slide 5. Go ahead. The number 7.
Sorry, I'll get there.
Okay. There we go. There we go. That third bullet point where it talks about intercession attendance, do we have that broken out? Or can we get that information broken out by the
By the school?
schools?
We certainly
Mhm.
can.
Okay. And then have we reached out to the community, to the families about the proposal? I mean, obviously they're getting the presentation today, but I didn't know if any other communication had.
Not for the current proposal. This was, we've revisited this.
Sure.
And their families were surveyed last year as a
time.
part of considering, but we've not had an opportunity to share with families.
Okay.
A consideration.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Haynes.
I just wanted to point out that the data during COVID is not very useful, and that I'm only bringing this up. There's other relevant points that are specific to the community and important to consider. But as someone who also is kind of a research nerd, I think it's important to point out that, one, that the data during COVID isn't really relevant. That to me, it looks like we have two very different experiences with schools, and that, the research on year-round schools is all over the place, and it's because there's so many different variables. Even whether it's single track or multi-track, can you staff intercession? It looks like being able to offer retired teachers as intercession staff at Bellwood, but not at Falling Creek. It's important to point that out, I guess, for the broader community, that this is not that year-round schools don't work, but that they have to be appropriately funded, and that's not always possible. And how many times have this board said over and over, we have a very strained budget, and if we were able to do what Hopewell did and put the whole division, or if we could have separate professional days with all the bells and whistles just for the year. Just want to point out that there is a lot of research that, when done well and funded, year-round schools help with food security issues, health equity, just achievement gaps, the list goes on and on. But they have to be fully funded, not grant funded, and we struggle with that. So.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Next, we have a presentation on elementary redistricting from Mr. Briggs.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Doherty. Today, I'm presenting on two proposed changes in the eastern elementary boundaries. The goal of these proposed changes is to alleviate overcrowding at Beulah Elementary, as well as relieving overcrowding at Enon Elementary. Here's a brief timeline of key dates in the process moving forward. Today kicks off the process with presenting this to the school board. In the coming weeks, we will be holding a series of meetings at each receiving school, the first being on November 28th at Salem Creek Elementary, or Salem Church Elementary, and the second meeting on December 5th at Marguerite Christian Elementary, and the process will culminate on December 12th when the school board will vote on one of the moves, which we will talk on more briefly. There are two different types of actions required for this process. There's an administrative adjustment, which is when less than 15% of students are being moved from one school to another. Beulah to Salem Church will impact less than 15% of students, so that will not require a vote. However, Enon to Marguerite Christian will impact greater than 15% of Marguerite Christian's total population, so a school board vote will be required. Our first move is Beulah to Salem Creek, Salem Church. We're too many creeks. We are proposing moving approximately 70 students into the Salem Church zone. Salem Church is currently around 63% of capacity. This will bring them up to 71% of capacity. And this move can be achieved via administrative adjustment because less than 15% of students are being moved. And again, this meeting will be November 28th at Salem Church Elementary at 6:30 p.m. Our other move is Enon Elementary to Marguerite Christian Elementary. Enon is currently over capacity, and this is a good opportunity to provide relief and utilize the available space at Marguerite Christian. Because this will impact greater than 15% of students at Marguerite Christian, the school board will be required to vote on this. A public information meeting will be held on December 5th at Marguerite Christian for families to visit the new school and meet their new principal and learn more. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but here are our next steps. Families will be contacted this week. We will be then hosting the meetings on Tuesday, November 28th at 6:30 p.m. at Salem Church, and on December 5th at 6:30 p.m. at Marguerite Christian. These will be great opportunities for the students to visit their new schools and meet their new principals. And with that, this concludes my presentation, and I will answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Briggs. Board members, any discussion? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Ms. Efron?
Mr. Briggs, thanks so much for the presentation, and welcome to your first board presentation. Killed it.
Thank you so much.
Cross it off your list. I would just appreciate having some demographic data of both the schools, I guess all 4 schools, the before and after redistricting, and including income and how that would impact Title I and community eligibility provision for both of those communities.
Yeah, so we do not have specific demographic information available. However, we did work with Nutrition Services to look at how this could impact the CEP, or the free and reduced lunch programs. So there really isn't a major change from one to the other. Beulah is going to go from 57% to 59% free reduced lunch. Salem Church is going to go from 64% down to 60%. Enon's going to go from 47% to 43%, and Marguerite Christian is going to go up from 62 to 64%. So there's no major swing either way that could impact those programs. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for speaking for the Bermuda District for addressing the Enon situation with capacity. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Next, we have a presentation on school day length and time from Dr. Tylis.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Doherty, thank you for providing time this evening for the review of this time topic that staff has been working on. To note at the very start, this discussion is completely about school year 2024-25 and is not about this current school year. So we just want to make sure folks are clear on that as we begin. As you're aware, the topic of time consistently generates a great deal of interest wherever it is raised. This is especially true when looking at this in the context of student performance and student lives beyond the school day. Over the past few years, you'll find both statewide, I think, as well as across the nation, time and the topic of student learning have become intertwined in many ways. As staff analyzed this on a local level, research indicated that CCPS does have a shorter day than average when compared with our regional counterparts. Hence, a proposal was brought forward with this presentation. It's being shared with the school board today that looks at one option, and that would be extending the school day by an additional 15 minutes. In the background of this dialogue, it's important to note that a variety of factors go into the actual development of the length of a school year calendar, as well as the structure of a school day. Essential in the development of these frameworks are state requirements that vary by student grade levels. Currently, in Chesterfield, each of our schools has a 6.5-hour instructional day. To calculate the state requirements, some time must be excluded, like lunchtime and some school site items like flex time. Our calculation leaves us with approximately 1,050 hours, which is above the state 990-hour minimum. At the same time, there are concerns when looking at the 140-hour requirement for course credits at the secondary level, as this is more challenging to reach with our current structures, especially at the middle school level. As noted earlier, when researching this topic, staff saw that CCPS is below the average length day when we compare it to other schools in the Region 1 area. One action that could help meet these state factors would be by adding minutes to each school day. When looking at adding a time to each schedule and still trying to maintain time between the tiers themselves, this is a proposed schedule, And it can be seen here how that would lay itself out with the addition of 15 minutes at each of these tiers. One side note we do want to take a moment to kind of emphasize today is that separate from this dialogue is that while all schools would remain on the same tier next year should this proposal go forward, one school does have to change and has nothing to do with the time adjustment. That would be the school Bensley, which will be under construction next year, and our plan is to move them onto the Falling Creek Middle School campus, which would require some adjustment as far as their start day and end of day is concerned. There are instructional hours generated with the addition of time that would definitely minimize the current waiver numbers that we're looking at and help in case we have things such as emergency closures that we have to deal with and not have to disrupt the current calendar. Other student benefits would include more instructional time to help close possible learning gaps and more time to address the changing standards that are coming from the state related to math, English, science, and social studies. This type of proposal would require the school board to actually adopt a new language within their policy as it pertains to the workday. And there would also be a need to adjust non-exempt contracts where they are currently aligned with student-specific hours. If the school board elects this step, it would be requested that this action be taken at the December meeting to allow time for the numerous logistics to fall in place, such as communication with families, items like contract development, and those things that would be critical as far as making sure it would roll out smoothly. While this proposal is one way to address the time issue, staff acknowledges there are numerous other factors that need to remain at the center of any discussion. One of these areas would be that we have to keep a focus on what's best when we look at specifically the middle school schedule itself and time there. How do we make adjustments that make sense? How do we make adjustments that will help get us in a direction, even if not all gathered at one time? Second point is that we also know that schools are working with parents now. You heard both Bob and Sharon relate stories about All In and the tutoring plan. And we do realize that's making an adjustment in many households where it's pertaining to time and what we're asking students to take on with the extended expectations that have been provided and paved out by the state. While we appreciate the number of factors involved in such an action, our hope is that at least this overview helps provide some framework in which we can review the topic in and of itself. And at this point, I would pause to hopefully address any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler. Board members, is there any discussion? Ms. Bailey?
Dr. Tyler, I'm hearing that you're saying that this is one option. I assume that maybe there's other options that are available to us other than extending the school day by 15 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we're looking at the topic of time. So how do we carve up time? How do we wish to take those steps forward? So the proposal itself talks about it's tangible. If you add 15 minutes, you know you added 15 minutes. Are there other things that could be explored within the individual schools to try to recapture time? Are there other ways that looking at the structures, literally of the schedules, we would say the most critical step out of each of the three levels that need to be analyzed would be at the middle school level, quite honestly.
Right, so it's my understanding then the middle school instructional day is the one that is having the biggest issues with seat time for those students that are taking high school credit courses in middle school, correct?
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing waivers in that domain more often than you would see them anywhere else.
So a solution would be to look at the middle school instructional day and possibly rework its time. So it's scheduled so that we could address this and maybe not impact elementary school students getting home so late in the afternoon or starting so early in the morning. Is that an option that we can look at?
I mean, school staff is open to explore any possible solutions that would help address the time issue.
I think this board is of the mentality right now, given what we know, that we would like to see other options explored and come back to us with other options other than extending the school day 15 minutes. pre-K to 12. Looking at other options would be, I think, prudent at this point. Do you all agree?
Mr. Harder?
Great.
Harder's light.
And, sorry, and I'll be fairly quick about it, but I think some of the options that were discussed earlier is there's a number of different things such as like flex time that's utilized, that we may be able to possibly minimize some of that. I would just hope that we weren't going to interfere at all with lunch. I've actually heard a lot of people reaching out to me. I do understand fully that there's not a lot of time at lunch for the kids, so I wouldn't want any of that time to be, shrunk any more than what it is. Yeah, I gotta watch out for my fellow foodies, but
That's noted for any review.
that's right, that's right.
Jotted it down.
But don't mess with lunch, but let's see what we could, possibly do with flex, and I agree with what Ms. Bailey said of maybe looking at some other options.
Ms. Haynes?
So my two big questions. I think the first question, and is connected to other options, is how was feedback gathered to make this proposal? Generally, I hear that we run things by the ACTS committee. I think the number one concern that I heard is that teachers and parents, because often our families wear both hats, right? Found out about this proposal on the news, and they asked that I raise that publicly tonight, because in this, in the spirit of mental health and families are struggling, and just encouraging us to be thoughtful about the impact of our proposals on our families, our staff. So was there did it go to the ACTS committee? And in the future, can we make sure that we always kind of consult different bodies? I mean, we obviously make the decision, but consulting different bodies also, along with what I'm hearing, varying proposals, I think that's where you tease out. And I remember, to be honest, I think it's kind of been a while, but I remember in the past there were more school board presentations back when the pandemic didn't take a lot of our time. That's a lot of what we did, but I remember, with the previous board and a little bit with this, where you would have like option A, option B, option C, and then that really allows for, okay, so what is the sort of where the will of the people is, because I hear flex time, that's an idea, but I also hear don't take away flex time, because that's where, kids get special education services sometimes during that. So I think giving option A, B, and C, and then people can weigh in. And I wanted to point out, we had 404 last time I looked comments. To me, that is exciting, because it's like, this is really important to parents, and that's our job, is to not go after the, fringe issues, but like the things that really our community cares about and wants to weigh in about and find a solution. So sorry, that's long, but was the ACTS committee or other groups consulted? And then two, I'd like to have an array of options. And then I guess three, was there any reasoning beyond, I see from the slide deck, that including elementary provides for additional time, but to finish unfinished learning, but I think the the idea is that can help with that. And the second point, time for elementary teachers encountering new math standards, maybe an extra professional development day for, I feel like there could be other options that can help with those. Was there another reason why elementary was included if middle school was the problem?
Sure, and again, just to kind of keep the lens on your first question, in gathering input to put this together, part of it is to bring it to the board on the front end, to then bring it out to groups for input, which is what was achieved here by putting it out whenever we touch on the topic of time. It's one item that each family does have a different lens on how that may fit in. I think many of you have received probably comments that pertain to don't start earlier, don't start us later. It's about sleeping in the morning. No, it's about getting home before it's too dark. eventually in a time discussion, you do have parameters of where it gets dark, early or late. And when you're trying to get into compliance sides, that's a piece of what you do have to look at. So no, our first run pertained more to saying what's closer to compliance and what looks like it would lead towards that instructional discussion. Second piece is, yeah, I mean, there's been a constant here that pertains through principal meetings and other venues that lift up from schools where we've heard folks say it's hard getting to kids. You alluded to the issue of we have special needs students, and when do we reach out to them? Well, if we shorten the day or keep it tight or eliminate what's there, those extra minutes don't appear. Flex time, if we have this as a conversation, I am sure there were folks that are going to advocate for flex time or against it on either side of that dialogue. So there is that opportunity for input. Hence, much like the school board, opportunity at a work session. This is not a board session. This was not an item that was proposed to be voted on this evening, as you all know. So from the context standpoint, this is how you get it out to the whole public at one time. So it's not just a school thing. This impacted families and staff simultaneously, hence all were notified at once. So from that perspective, as far as trying to keep a lens on what you said to making sure that we're worried about the mental health of folks, we are concerned about the mental health of folks. And I think that it would be disingenuous to think any other way. Part of why the dialogue came up is because of events that transpired historically, and an attempt to try to close some of those things that have happened have brought these types of conversations forward. All in tutoring side or all in attendance side are all based on how do you fix pieces of what had once been, in many people's eyes at least, a pretty smooth-lined operation of growth over time. So, again, all taken in as accounts. I don't think there's any question. We concur. We will look at every avenue we can to gather input. If we're going to start with a middle school dialogue, and that's where it's requested to go, Dr. Doherty has talked about numerous times of do we create project points for principals to bring it out to staff teams, but then we have to look at what's that universal piece, because if flex time's agreed upon that it has to be reduced, school A can't say, well, we're still running it for 100+ hours a year and subtracting from our classes. And school B says, oh no, we were willing to cut it. At some point, we have to come to consensus too. It's not just opinions. It's about reaching consensus at the end of the day. And we'd be happy to explore it in any direction that we're asked to.
Maybe just to keep all options open, looking at, because some people mentioned this, extending the school year and getting rid of the thing, I hear this all the time, half days switching to full days. Just put it all out there, since obviously this is a topic people really care about.
Yeah, I'd also note, as they eliminate half-days, that also eliminates the chance for professional development that you also alluded to we may need more of. So, each of those things kind of have those
mentioning
pull
that,
that go on both
right?
sides.
We can
So,
put, the options, the costs, the benefits, so that this board can then, in public, make for the next board.
It's basically a matter of pick your poison. And that's what we need to do, is pick our poison. And I think right now, the community hearing 15 minutes added to the day, they didn't like that particular bitter pill. But if they look at all the bitter pill options, maybe this one will be more attractive. Because if we come back and say, oh, we're going to add 7 days to the calendar in order to meet bottom line is we have to meet seat time obligations, and we have to meet the requirement that the state is imposing. So it's pick your bitter pill. Which one do you want to swallow? But I think we want to see more options.
Sure.
Especially as it relates to the middle school, because that's where that's where the issue relies, is
No,
is
it's
what
ve-
can middle school do so our high school and elementary aren't
Right. And
hopefully
it's
impacted.
noted very clear that we would definitely direct our dialogue towards the middle school level at this time.
And just to throw this out there, but I have, it's probably not possible, but I'm sure it would not be a bitter pill if it was just middle school and the whole day shifted, because I hear all the time middle school starts too early. Probably not feasible with busing, but I just had to throw that out.
Well, and within that dialogue, it's also noted that elementary parents wrote in that wouldn't have started as early as the middle school, that was too early for them to come into. So again, each family has different issues depending on where they stand. It's fully understood and appreciated.
Thank you. And thank you for, we all know you care deeply about the mental health, but sometimes it has to be said. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon.
Next, we have announcements, communications, and school board comments. School board members, are there any announcements or comments? At the next school board business meeting, the next school board business meeting will be held this evening, November 14th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. If there's no further public business, we will enter into closed session, which will be held in the superintendent's conference room. Madam Clerk, please announce the items for today's closed session.
It is my understanding that the school board desires to enter into closed session in accordance with Section 2.2-3711.a of the Code of Virginia, the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and specifically under subsection 1, the discussion and consideration of personnel disciplinary matters, and 2, the discussion and consideration of student disciplinary matters and matters that would involve the disclosure of student records. And Madam Chair, y'all are going into the public meeting room, conference room.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Members of the board, you have just heard the items requested to be discussed in closed session. Do I have a motion in that regard?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you please call roll on the motion?
Dot Heffron,
Aye.
Debbie Bailey,
Aye.
Ryan Harder,
Aye.
Catherine Haynes,
Aye.
Ann Coker.
Aye. We are now in closed session.